In today's video, I'm going to be building a 13 scale TARDIS model based on the prop as designed by Richard Hoodlin for the 1996 television movie that starred Paul McGann. Why? Well, because I can, but also because this is a commission from a collector. Now, out of all the classic Doctor figures in the 5.5 inch range by character options, the 8th Doctor is the only one not to be represented with his own TARDIS, and that kind of spoils the lineup when collectors display their figures alongside the various TARDISes, and so in this instance, I'm going to address that. Right off the bat here, I have to tell you that this is not the first TARDIS in this scale that I've made. I was approached by another collector who wanted one in time for the release of the first ever classic Doctor Who figure that Character Options did, and that just happened to be a season 12 4th Doctor as portrayed by Tom Baker. And naturally, that collector wanted a TARDIS to go with him. So I was charged to build the appropriate prop, because at that point Character Options had publicly stated that they had absolutely no intention of ever producing an official one at any time soon. As irony would have it, not long after completing the client build, Character Options themselves approached me to design their official TARDIS toy, as well as a number of other items including Sonic screwdrivers, Daleks, one of which won Toy of the Year in 2007 I might add, plus various Darroses and a number of other items, some of which were never released for one reason or another. To kickstart this model project off, I started with the original police box plans from the TV movie. However, as is always the case with things like this, what was drawn up wasn't quite what was built for the production. But thankfully, the TARDIS in all its guises is a sort of speciality of mine, and I was quickly able to adapt those plans into something that I knew was a little bit more accurate to what was seen in the final show. When I say a little bit, I mean a lot more. Once that was done, it was time to dig out all the materials and start making something vaguely TARDIS shaped. The approach for this model was quite simple and straightforward. It was just sheets of clear acrylic for the backer plates and white styrene for the fascia plates, cut up into panels for the walls and doors. Then these were clad to one another and assembled into an open-ended box tube to which various other details were fabricated from styrene and added over the top of that. However, before anything could even be glued together, one of the first things that had to be done was to cut out the hinge receiver slots for the single opening door from one of the acrylic backer plates, which was then designated as the front wall. So this is going to be the front of the box, and we're only going to have one door, and that will be this one, and it will open inwards. Now before I can glue any of the parts together, I need to create a hinge for this door to open on, and I need to put it in here. Now the hinge is going to be a piece of brass rod, so I need to remove some of the material just in here and just down here for the brass rod to act as my hinge and to sit in there, so it'll sit within that and would be captured by this front piece. So it'll sit in here and poke out that way, and sit in here, and eventually when this is cut out it'll hinge into the top part here. So first thing I need to do is mark out where on this the cutout has to be for that hinge. I've taken a caliper, I've set it to the thickness of my hinge, and it's just scoring down here. And this is going to be my score line for when I come to cut this little bit out. And I do the same for down here. Make a few lines in that. And now I know to cut along these points here. Once marked up, it was time to crack out the woefully underpowered rotary tool to try and hog out as much material as possible from the acrylic plate, though it wasn't long before the files and the sandpaper were deployed to finish the job. Really what I should have done here was to use a hand tool, in particular a razor saw, as in all honesty it would have been much quicker and far less hassle than fighting the material with that weedy Dremel knockoff that I own. But clearly I just didn't think of this at the time, and I do have a tendency to make things unnaturally difficult for myself. Now that the hinge slots were cut, it was time to gather up all the wall and door parts and gently sand their surfaces in readiness to laminate them together. The resulting lightly keyed surfaces would not only give the glue something to grab to, but also later down the line give the paint finish something to adhere to as well, thus preventing it from flaking off when being handled. So now that this has had its hinge parts taken out and it's been sanded, I would like to adhere this to this, and to do that I'm going to be using this solvent cement, and I'm using it just to tack it down, so I'm going to go all around the edges, all around here, and just tack it down, and then once that's held in place and it's nicely positioned, I shall go in with this. Now you may be wondering what these are for. Well, these are just effectively going to be positioners, so I'm going to place this into here once the solvent cement is in, and use that to make sure that everything's nice and true. So I might as well just get on with that. So, here we go. Let's see if it's going to come out. Where is the glue? Okay, little tip. Just a tip, mind, there's no solvent coming out of this, so that says to me that the end is bunged. And if you come across this problem yourself, get a lighter or a match or something, come on, whoop, and that burns the stuff out. And we should have, there we go, and there it is. There's our solvent. And just, I mean, I don't have to be particularly neat about this, I just want it to hold this stuff in place. So down there, up there, along here. And that should be just about enough. Bit too much there. So, get everything into alignment, push it in. Is it aligned up there? Yep. It's aligned down there. Now I'm going to use these 1, 2, 3 blocks just to hold it down. So now the original solvent has had time to set, I just want to go round it again with the liquid solvent cement and finish off the job. Just to seal it. So I'm just going round now the edges, and hopefully capillary action will make this glue together, or weld together. So, once all this was set up, it was time for me to turn my attention to cutting out that single door. Because I didn't want the ensuing tribulations of cutting through 2 differing types of materials in one pass, I opted to score the top styrene fascia with a utility knife, then after that I used a razor saw to make the final pass through the acrylic. However, I quickly found that something was up. Despite the thin curve of the razor saw blade, I was still having troubles getting through the material as it seemed to be sticking and dragging for some reason. Maybe the blade was too dull for the acrylic, or it could have just been down to the fact that it's covered in the ever-present rust that permeates almost every metal tool that I own, despite me taking a plethora of different precautions in an attempt to ward it off. So it occurred to me that lubrication would be my best friend here, and thus I deployed the healthy squirt of everyone's favourite libation, WD-40, and what a world of difference that made. I was practically flying through the material after that. The only issue here was that the WD-40 itself activated the thin film of rust that was on my blade, and so everything ended up being stained in a delightful shade of brown. The acrylic, the styrene, of course my fingers, which was mildly annoying because I like things to be neat and tidy, and above all, clean. Oh well, I'll just have to live with it. With the basic wall and door plates done, it was time to start thinking about making the 4 corner posts, and so more sheet styrene was deployed as well as a variety of styrene extrusions to make this happen. To begin with, 4 lengths of hollow box tubing was stacked and taped together, as these were going to form the core of each post, onto which all the detail cladding strips would later be added. To ensure that each core would be a uniform length and identical to its counterparts, the entire stack was cut in a single pass, first with a razor saw, and then, just to see if there was any appreciable difference in the quality of the cut, I used another of my rusty tools, this time my dad's old miter saw. Now, despite the 2 different blades being used, there was not much in it, to be honest, as both types of saw appear to produce similar finishes, especially after the cores had been sanded flush and deburred, but at least my curiosity had been sated. Next up, it was back to the sheet styrene to fabricate the cladding detail. This was scored a couple of times and then snapped along its length. Doing it this way is a lot quicker than trying to cut through the full thickness of the sheet in a multitude of passes. I haven't got time for that, and I doubt anyone has either. Anyway, once I had enough of these strips, they were all then back sanded together to get rid of the burrs created by the blade passing through the material. Back to the postcores, the deliberately overlong strips of styrene were given a healthy and liberal coating of cement and then carefully laid into position, using scrapped styrene spacers when necessary. Once in place and I was happy with the positioning, small spring clamps were applied to hold it all together, and so the entire unit was then left alone until the cement had done its thing. After a short while, when I was sure that everything was firmly welded together, I could now address the overlong strips and cut them down to the perfect size using the razor saw butted directly up against the inner core. The reason for this is that you'll always get a perfect uniformity over cutting out all the parts independently and then assembling them. Lastly, lengths of quarter-round beading were laid into the 3 outermost corners of each post. With the 4th corner being on the inside, it would therefore not need any, and as it would never be seen. As before, just like the strip cladding, the beading was applied overlong, but in this particular case it was trimmed with flush cut snips once the styrene cement had cured. Had I used the razor saw, there would have been the potential for the saw's teeth to actually bite into the spindly beading and tear it right out, so I opted to play it safe, and besides, snipping them was far faster than sawing anyway. Finally, each completed post was then given another pass of sanding just to catch any of the rough edges that may have been previously missed. With the basic formula starting to come together, now was a good point as any to solve and weld the window frames into place. Up until now I had left them off due to their fragile nature, as I didn't want to have them in place and accidentally snap them whilst working on the wall panels. Once they're all seated and correctly positioned, I could start bringing everything together to create that main box carcass. So here we are at Panic Central Station. This is quite an important element of the job. I have to get this corner post on square to this, which is why I've rammed the whole thing up against this square edge. I'm also battling the heat, and because of that the plastic is going a little bit soft. But to try and combat that, I'm using this particular glue because it's slightly thicker, so if I were using the thinner stuff it would flash off before it's had a chance to grab. So yeah, this is quite a vital moment. Yep, that's going to need doing. Right, the final post. Let's glue this side. Hang on, need more glue than that. More solvent weld. Need that to be right in there. I'm actually just smushing the stuff around now. Now, that needs to go right up into there. Turn it around. Put it into here. Make sure that's all nice and aligned. And now we wait. Beep, 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 beep. This to here, stop shaking. Put that into there. That into there. That's locked in nicely. That fell nicely. Put that into there. 90 degrees. Is it sticking? Yes it is. Put some solvent. Oops, it's going onto the board. That I don't want to happen. There we go. And same down here. I really don't want it touching the board. So I'm going to move it there. Now, lock that in there. Whoops. Lock that in there and there. There's my little squarey bit. Look at that. Again, that wasn't so bad. Next on the list of things to do was to make up the all-important sign boxes. For these, more sheet styrene was cut into strips and chopped down to the appropriate sizes so they could be formed into the trough-like structure. When it came to gluing all the parts together, 1, 2, 3 blocks were employed to keep everything square, as the last thing you want with a piece like this is to have it on the wonk. They're also really helpful because they provide extra support to the parts during the process. A square was also deployed for the same reason. With the first sign box completed, you can see how the 1, 2, 3 blocks help to maintain a consistent square across this simple shape. All that was needed now was to make 3 more. Getting the sign boxes positioned accurately was absolutely imperative. They're a prominent feature of the TARDIS, and to have them lopsided would have totally ruined the look of the model, making it look incredibly amateurish. With this in mind, I precisely measured exactly where they should be, and then constantly checked to ensure that all the horizontal lines across the build ran perfectly parallel to one another, with yet more cross-checking and measuring, followed by a further round of verification with the square at various key points around the carcass. When I was happy that everything was where it should be, I could finally commit with the solvent cement, and permanently set the sign boxes into place. I then went around the joins with my brush to blend in and neaten the cement overspill. Now that the main elements of the shell were built, I could concentrate on all the inlay details that adorn the TARDIS and give it its distinctive character. The first to go on were the gems that run along the inside of the corner posts where they meet the walls and doors. As before, they were applied overlong and then cut flush with snips before a final pass of sanding was applied. Next up, the topper strips were added to the top of the sign boxes. These were measured and cut to size, then glued and pressed into place. For the corner post caps, scraps of extrusion were chopped into short lengths, stacked up and then glued together. These were then tacked into position with solvent cement and then given a final edge sealing pass of solvent weld. You'll have noticed that the corner post caps here don't have the traditional beading on the outside corners like the earlier models have. Just like the current props, the 8th Doctor's TARDIS had simple blocks instead. Finally, having made and installed the 3-step pieces that sit below the sign boxes, I could add the finishing touches with the wall and door centre dividers. These were, once more, overlong lengths of plaster-wrapped extrusion, carefully positioned and welded into place, then snipped to length with flush-cut snips, and finished off with a neatening pass of sanding. So here's a little progress update. As you can see, the main body of the box is now completed, and it's got all the details all the way around. We have corner posts, walls, sign boxes, the little steps, posts and the centre door divider. So effectively everything is more or less built. Got the door. Now the next thing I really need to do is hang said door, but before I can do that I need something to hang it to, because as you may recall I'm going to put pins in here and in here, so they need something to receive both pins. There is a hole in here, but I need to build a base next, so that'll enable me to position the door in the base with a little hole and keep messing around with it until it truly works. You know, if it all goes to plan, it will work first go, to just show how amazing I am. Once that's done, the roof has to go on. I have to build it first, and then I'll be doing the electronics and what have you. But before I'll be doing the electronics, I need to paint it. But we have broken the back of the TARDIS build, and it's starting to look very Paul McGanny TARDIS. Little Tom Baker is here helping us out just to have a look at how this thing is progressing, and it's looking really nice, and I'm quite pleased with the way it's going. Still got a bit of filling to do, but that'll be done once everything is effectively built, and then once the filling is done, it's just little minor touch-ups here and there. Then it's texturing, then it's painting, and as I said, it's going on to the roof and the electronics and what have you. So that's where we are, and I'm going to crack on. Okay, I've now got all the pieces for the base, and unfortunately I've hit a little snag in terms of how I'm going to build it. My initial plan was to effectively build it like this. These are slightly oversized, this is the front and rear, and I was going to overhang it very slightly and add the bevel in later. So what you would have had is something along these lines, and then this underhang here, which would have been 2 mil thick, would have been where I would have put the bevel in. Now, unfortunately, my cutting was just a fraction off, and I mean a tiny fraction, and unfortunately it won't work now, so the longest pieces are actually too short. However, having thought about it, that wasn't a very good way of putting this beveled edge on the base here. It occurred to me, why don't I do this and actually have this trailing edge butting up to this outer edge, and then what I can do, trim this to fit this, and then to get my drop down, take another piece of plastic, stick it up to the top there, just drop down by 2mm or whatever it is, and then bevel to that. Probably doesn't make much sense, but we shall see. That's the plan. Right, so we've skipped ahead now, and here is the almost completed base. As you can see, here are those drop downs that I was talking about, and they are dropped down by approximately, well, not approximately, they are dropped down by 2mm from this surface, and I've used 2mm stock, so that gives us a nice 45-degree bevel here. Or there will be a bevel once I put some filler in, so I'll just put it all in through here. Now also, having done that, I have made pretty much the roof. I mean, this doesn't look like much yet, and I didn't film it because it's pretty much the same process as the base. Now, what I've done here is, again, it's a simple square with some cladding around it. You might be wondering what this is for. That's actually for the electronics. There's going to be a switch in there, and this is the hole. Very simply, I drilled it out with a 4mm bit and then enlarged it with a 8mm bit. I do need to enlarge it further because this is the electronics, and that's supposed to poke up inside, but as you can see, it's just a bit snug, so I'll have to take a file and mash it out a bit. I mean, it doesn't have to be neat, just as long as this thing here can slide up into it, and it'll go a bit like so. It'll sit in something like that. Now, I do have to do the pitch now, and that's the fiddly bit. I'm not going to film that probably, depends on how I feel, but yeah, I need to enlarge this hole, add on the pitch, then start. God knows how I'm going to do it, but I need to create a lens. I pretty much have a clear-ish sort of idea as to what I'm going to do, but whether it'll work that way I won't know until I start. So we don't need to go into that now either, so I'm going to crack on with the dreaded pitch. Damn you, Pythagoras! To make the roof, I started off with a long strip, and this becomes the pitch. So then I need to divide it into bits like there, all the way along, and then from that I will cut. So once I'd cut the thing into lots of little bits, it would then turn these into that, and again I swapped over for this knife, which gives me slightly more control over than the box cutter knife. That's looking good. So let's just put these together, so the roof will go something like this. And that gap is obviously because the thing has to be pitched, so if these joined here, that would be a massive mistake, which meant I would have cut it wrong. But because we've got this nice gap, that means everything's just about right. So, yep, all looking good. All matches up, which is nice. Perfect. Having cut those pitch panels out, the next step for me was to weld them all together and then attach them to the rest of that roof section that I'd made previously. Any and all seams were filled with a plastic slurry of my own concoction rather than your traditional filler. This not only prettied things up, but also had the added bonus of homogenizing the entire part into a unified whole, over it being merely just the sum of its parts. With the roof now set aside to fully cure, I could turn my attention back to the base and make a start on adding in that beveled edge detailing from car body filler. First of all, I masked all the areas off where I didn't want the filler to go with blue automotive tape. Then it was a simple case of mixing up the filler and applying it to those outer edges. To start with, a basic blocking impasse was laid down. This is merely applying filler to rough in the general shape of the bevel, but as always, I'm cautious in the application and cleaned up any overspur as I went along. Once that part had cured, more filler was applied, but this time in a more controlled fashion to really nail down the angled shape that I was after. After this, the bevel was preened with a pass of red putty to help catch all the imperfections and to smooth everything out. As always, this was followed by yet more sanding before I could remove the tape to see how it all looked.
Am I ready? Just... yeah, that's good enough. Right, okay. Let's start peeling it away. Yeah, look at that. Perfect. Not a single piece of filler where I don't want it. That's that. These little marks here I can wash off. It's only goop, so I can wash that off later. This would be interesting. Can I get this on? Ah, yes, look, there we go. The only thing that I don't like about the red stuff, it doesn't have to stain your fingers. I'm right-handed, so my right hand really gets quite badly stained red. In fact, it gets stained with everything I use. Wire wool is really nice stuff as well to use, but if you happen to let yours get a bit rusty like I do, I mean, most of my stuff rusts because out here in the conservatory it does get humid and then dry and then humid and dry, so... But yeah, the rust, as I'm using the wire wool, transfers all over my hands. Usually it's my right hand, but I do use both hands for various jobs anyway. But oh, look at that. Look at that. All nicely done, so yeah, pleased with that. I'm going to clean that up and see how it goes. But for now, that is... I would say that's pretty acceptable. I need to just take a little bit down on here. In fact, I can just do that now. Just... There we go. So all the corners, yeah, all the corners can do with a little bit. Yep. Same there. Actually, just go all the way around, to be honest. Just completely flat sanding it. I don't want to add any more angles to it. Actually, just give it a quick... Sounds like I've got a visitor. I have. She's down there. My cat's decided to come and eat dinner. Right. Yep, that's looking good. Apologies if I went off camera, but yeah, I'm still filming on one camera with no monitors. Right. Tomorrow, because I'm going to stop for today, I should be able to get on with all the things I keep promising that I'm going to get on with, but at least now this is done, so no reason why I shouldn't.
I was now at a stage where I could start pulling everything together, as all the major components were now fabricated, so from here on in it was just a simple matter of getting the pieces ready before the painting stage could begin. To start with, brass rod was cut into short lengths and set into the door to act as the much talked about hinge. Then the entire model was given a liberal coating of red putty to preen and neaten up all the seams. Once I'd had it air dried for a day, I went around it with various grades of sandpaper and nail files to smooth it all out. Now the time came where I could finally address the all-important door hanging.
So the hole's in, and I'm just taking this piece and dragging it up and down just to try and slightly widen the hole. Now let's do a test fit. That goes on there, and obviously there's a little pin that's got to go into the hole we've just put in there. So that, whoops, that goes into there. Oh, that's nice. So now I'm just going to block the other end of the pin hinge up here. This will be glued in later, but let's try our door. Look at that. Works perfectly. Perfect. All I've got to do now is decide whether I'm going to start painting this, or at least texturing it, or do that lamp piece. Because I could do, like I said earlier, I could do either or at the minute. But yeah, I'll see how my fancy takes me. But for now, that's the last. Actually, I suppose I could put these little details on, like the pull to open panel and the lock and the handle. But yeah.
With that success firmly under my belt, it was time to start making the details. Scraps of styrene were used to make the pull to open panel and also the two very small door handles, while a picture nail was modified with my pin vise into something that resembles a door lock. Next up was the lamp lens, the one part that I was secretly dreading because it requires a length of clear acrylic tubing to be cut oversize and then turned down to the correct shape.
So now you can probably tell why I wanted to cut this piece of acrylic rod down. It's effectively so I can get it into this chuck. Yeah, of course this looks perfectly legit, and I'm going to turn my lens down. If ever there was a terrible idea that I've ever had, this is probably it's up there. So what could possibly go wrong? I don't know. But let's film it and put it on the internet because that's always fun. So this is going to be spinning. I'm going to be using this wood bit here, and I've got a little drawing down here. And effectively what I'm going to be doing is using the drawing as a guide and, well, poking it and hoping for the best. I'm somewhat reticent. I am going to go away and think about this because I want to really get this drawing in my head absolutely straight. I have done this before, I've done it many times, but never have I done it on camera. And yeah, I really need to go away and think about this, but I'm not condoning this, I'm not recommending that anyone does this. It's dangerous. So yeah, okay, I'm going to go away and think about this, see if it's a good idea, and then crack on. Yeah, it has to be done.
Wearing goggles.
Yes, I'm going to be wearing goggles, don't worry. Right, okay, here we are. So, the dreaded turning. Obviously I've only got two hands, so I can't operate this, so my wife is here and she's going to be following my instructions and holding the trigger. I suppose we ought to go through the safety precautions first. So safety squints deployed. Got your safety squints deployed? No, okay. Actually, maybe goggles would be better for you. There you go, goggles for you. Some goggles for me. So safety squints deployed, goggles on. Sphincter muscles engaged. Cringe factor set to 12, because obviously it's one better than 11. And emergency services on speed dial. Okie dokie. Christ, just go. I did not mean to do that, got a bit too close. Grrr, you bugger. I did not mean to do that. Might do a bit of wet polishing. Right, go. I think that might just do. What we'll do is cut it off. Ready? Ready?
Don't mess this
Come on, I'm not going to mess
up.
this
I'm
up.
not
Yeah.
going to do this now, huh?
Yeah, come on.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Alex, don't worry.
Keep going.
That looks dangerous.
It is dangerous.
Yes.
Getting the top.
There you go. There's a lamp, but just need to clean it up now.
It's very nice. I'm going to get the pedal.
Yeah.
Look, come back to look.
So it's the next day, and I've done a little bit of work off camera, just fiddly stuff that really would not be that interesting to actually see me do. In particular, I've started painting our little lens here. The reason I'm doing that now, and the rest of the housing, which I've also built off camera, is because if I was to assemble all this together unpainted, trying to paint it whilst assembled will be an absolute nightmare. So I've started doing that. I've glued on the lock finally and trimmed that down. I've put on the pull to open panel, and I've done a little bit of work over here. I've actually added into the base a second hole, and you'll see here there's this bent piece of brass. That's the same stuff as the hinges. That brass piece is effectively a lock. It's to keep the door closed, so it will sit underneath the base and poke up through, and this bit here is actually like a little locking mechanism, so you put it in and fold it round, so just to keep it nice and keep it in place. So that's where I am at the moment. I've got a few little more odds and ends to do, but next up really I need to start painting the inner part of the base, because again I can't paint the inside black once I've assembled it, so I've got to do a bit of painting, a bit of assembling and a bit more painting, so that's effectively what we're going to do next. So that's the first light coat. I don't really need to spray it anymore because I do need to do texturing, so I'll leave it at that, and then tomorrow or later on I'll spray the piece here and the piece there black. In fact, actually the doors, in fact everything bar this I'll spray black, and then by the next day I'll be able to start doing the texturing, but for now that's where I should leave it. Matte black, 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 black. Light coats. So that's a tack coat. I'll leave it and I'll come back and do some more. Unfortunately you're not going to see it because it's tipping it down with rain, it's getting quite late and it's dark, so oh, and I'm running out of battery power, so take my word for it, I'm going to spray that and it'll be all fine and dandy by tomorrow. It's been just a little over 24 hours since you saw me just a moment ago spraying the grey and the black primers on. I had to leave it for that amount of time purely because the next stage is the texturing, and that's going to be quite a aggressive process. There's going to be lots of wet paint, and I didn't want that to affect the partially cured primer. Also, as you can see, it's quite a milestone. We've actually completed everything. What can I say? Well, today what I've done, because I kept forgetting about it, is put the hinges in, so they're nicely formed and they're stuck in. I also, before I sprayed it, I put a couple of bits of detail on the handle. I just drilled a couple of holes, and it's the same with this. I drilled a couple of drill holes in there to sort of simulate where the screws would be. So as you'll see with the lamp, I have already built it. I built that off camera purely because it was a bit of a fiddly job. It's also painted. Now that painting is a pre-painting. what I did was I cut myself a piece of styrene plastic for the base, a slightly smaller styrene square for the top, and then you've got your 4 brass pieces, and this little lamp piece goes sandwiched into it. The top here is actually a cover for a screw for my back door. And the reason why I painted it then assembled it is because had I done it the other way round, I would have had a devil's own job trying to get my brush with the blue paint in behind here without touching the lens. So it's kind of like a pre-paint. I mean, I'm going to texture it and what have you, and you know, the entire piece, but it just saves me a lot of time. So I'm really pleased. It's all done, and yeah, couldn't resist putting the temporary sign boxes in. They're just bits of paper stuck in, but we've got to that stage now where everything is built, everything is ready. It is just time to texture it, and I'll be texturing it with neat acrylic paint. Again, I don't want to go too heavy. It's got to be quite subtle, but I need some sort of texturing on there, so it'll be neat acrylic paint just stippled on, probably brushed on as well, sponged, and then I'll scrape some further acrylic paint over the surface with a palette knife, and then it'll be onto painting it. It's not glued together yet. This is one of those things where you think, well, should I glue it now or should I glue it later? So what I've decided to do, texture, base coat of blue, then I will glue the whole thing together, complete with the door, and then I'll weather it on top of that once it is all glued together. The lamp is in place, the lid comes off, all the electronics will go in there, so that's all pre-painted black. The inside is painted black, and yeah, nearly done. Just a little bit more work and that's it. So I'm pleased. Actually, I kind of want to keep it now. However, the client has paid for it, so what can I do? Steal his money and keep it. Let's get on, I'm all ready. Get rid of those nerves. This is always the nerve-wracking bit, because this is the bit where you can potentially bollocks up the entire build. So, small amounts. The colour doesn't match, I'm just choosing blue because, well, because the TARDIS is blue, but I possibly will be using the purple and the browns and all the other colours, but for now, nervy. Ooh. this is it. It's now time to start airbrushing this, and so far I've mixed up my paint, and that's 2 parts paint to 2 parts thinner. My compressor is primed and charged to 20 psi, and so all I have to do really is attach my airbrush, put the paint in here, and start putting the paint from there onto there. So wish me luck. Oh, and as always, fine cup of tea. Cheers. Let's crack on with it. Ooh, scary. Right. What's happening here? I think my airbrush is cocked. Okay, let's try it. My airbrush does seem a bit cocked, but let's just carry on. No, the airbrush is cocked. I have to rethink that. Right, plan B. I'm going to be using the thinned airbrush paint, and I'm going to have to paint it on with a brush. Whoops. Actually, that might be in our favour. Let's do it this way. Probably going to have to do a couple of coats then. I mean, I would have done anyway. Let's just do it this way. Not exactly how I'd intended to do this, but you know, you just go with the flow. I think I'm going to have to get myself a new airbrush. The one that I've got is a really cheap one, and you get what you pay for, unfortunately. Right, I seem to have sorted the problem out. It was my inexperience showing, and despite the fact I'd mixed the paint as per the instructions, this airbrush doesn't seem to like it. It wants it thinner, so it seems to be coming out. Let's go again. That's all it was. Despite all the little things that slightly went awry, the model is now completely painted in its flat tone, so it's looking good. I actually like the colour. So what have I learnt? Well, a few things really. I've got to keep an eye on my compressor, that's for sure. I've been using my airbrush, and as I've mentioned before a couple of times, it is a bit of a cheap one, as is the compressor, so it tends to lose pressure. Now when it loses pressure, the paint isn't coming out and it gets a bit insipid, and then it starts to splatter and cough. I've also really got to keep my eye on the temperature of the compressor, because that was getting up to at least 100 degrees centigrade, possibly more. But anyway, despite all that, it's looking good, I think. I'm pretty pleased with the way it's turned out. So next step for me, I'm going to let this cure overnight. It is getting late, and despite the fact to you it looks relatively bright in here, as I always say, it is getting dark. I've got the old ISO exposure whacked up quite high so you can at least see something. So my next step is to start weathering this. I may go in for the black first, or I may do a few highlights, I don't know, it depends on how I feel at the time. But yeah, last days on this, very close to completion. Once the weathering is done, it's just a case of putting the electronics in here, so I'm happy, despite all the little wobbles I've been having with it. It's always the same with airbrushing. As you saw, I thought the airbrush was broken, and I then started brush painting it, then I thought, well, I'll give it another chance. But anyway, it's just the trials and tribulations of doing things like this. But yeah, I'm happy, so weathering next, and then we're done. So my mid-tones are down, my bass tone is down, and what I'm going to do now is put some black and some brown on. Very subtle, very watery. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, to be honest, but it's just simple artist's acrylic paint. And it's going to be, as I said, very watery. Loosely mixed. I don't want a pure black, and I don't want a pure brown. So it's just a case, oops, that's a bit too much. Yeah, let's just get on with it. This is the bit I always dread to some degree. Let's put some over here. Put a bit of brown in it, just so it's not pure black. Lots of water, actually more water than that. In fact, lots more water than that. I want it to be a very inky consistency. Right, it's not pure black, so we can start. Just some water. Here we go. Just on. All over the place. Doesn't need to be brilliant, but some of it, just slapping some water in, just so we don't get tide marks everywhere. And I can start mixing in all the other colours into the water. Don't want too much. That's probably a bit too much, but it gives me a start. Then take something like this, just take the excess off. See, the longer you leave the paint, the more it stains. So I don't particularly want to stain too much. But this will start tying it together. Actually, I just want to put a bit more down. Oops. Bloody door, I don't want that coming off. A bit more dark material down at the bottom. Now we do have a slight tide mark there, so let's see if we can get rid of that. It's getting caught up. But this is a process you can't really faff about with. You've got to just get it on and go. A bit more water. I'm just literally scrubbing it in. So I can start adding colour. More down at the bottom. More down here, up here. I'm going to rub down the side there just to make sure there's no tide marks. Well, that was a bit of a bugger, sorry about that. My memory card completely filled up and cut off mid-filming it. So, I'm not quite finished yet. I have done the majority of it. I've done the door and I've done the base, that's over there. Now I'm going to do the roof. I was thinking about masking this light off, but you know what? I can be careful enough not to get it. So, pretty much the same. It's lots of water, which I'm just mixing up. I don't know if you can see off camera. No, you can't. Actually, why don't I just move this to here? And that over there, maybe we can start seeing some stuff. Can you see it? Let's have a look in the... Yes, you can. So water here, and a bit of black, a bit of brown, not enough brown, lots of water. Again, I want to get it to that sort of inky consistency. Now, do I have everything else to hand? Yes, I do. So, just want to leave it in situ. A bit more water than that. Like I said, you don't have to be neat, you don't have to be tidy at this point, because we're just moving shit around. So, start dabbing it off. So, a bit more colour. Let's just go along the top again. Just up here. Again, more water. All the filth and the muck is going to accumulate on the tops anyway, so you might as well add that in. So, a bit up the top there. Right. Dab, 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 dab. Dab, dab, dab. Saying dab helps, by the way. So I can probably go around and put some more on, but for now that's pretty good. So almost done. I'm going to do a little bit more off camera and then we'll have a little bit of a review. I've taken the door off here and I'm hoping you can sort of see what I'm talking about with the different shades. But this door was painted one shade, that was our base colour, and then over that various lighter shades were semi-dry brushed on. Then I added more white to the blue to create a lighter tone and then did the same dry brushing on with that. Once that was dry, it was then very watery down black and brown mixed together haphazardly and put on there. And you can sort of see the delineation of colours. There's one colour there. Just going around, this is behind the door so you won't actually get to see this. And here actually the lighter shade is just in here brushed on. So that's the original base shade with a bit of black because the black seeped underneath it. So my next job that I would like to do is to add a little bit of something to this and this. Maybe a bit of gold to that and a bit of silver to that and a bit of silver to the handle on the other side. Right, let's get the world's tiniest brush. This is a quadruple zero. Smallest amount of paint on the end of this brush possible. And I just want to nick the corners or the edges, so just a little bit. Again, I don't know if you can see any of this on camera, but it's going on very slightly. There you go, just a little bit, just as a little highlight. So, might as well... Oh, the paint tastes disgusting. I'm putting it in my mouth. Now, the same with... Ooh, don't do that. the silver paint. Try not to get the silver paint actually on my door. Same thing, bit of dry brushing, and I just want the smallest amount, so if I bugger this up I can always repaint it. Just a little bit of wear. Just on the edges, just there. Yeah, a little bit more. Because I noticed the original prop is actually quite badly worn. So, just the tiniest of highlights. You don't need to see me do it, but I'm going to do pretty much this on the pull to open panel as well.
Phew! I don't mind admitting that that was a little bit nervy. Everything is now complete. As you can possibly see, I've got the black curtain in there. That's a little cardboard insert I mentioned earlier. The windows and their glazing are in. You may just be able to see the hammered effect as I turn it around. Each window has its own set of hammered panes. So there they are. You might just be able to see it. And finally, this main body has been welded to the base. So yeah, the nerves come in because we're using lots and lots of glue at this point, and of course you've got the finished paintwork and you don't want glue seeping out and spoiling everything you've worked hard to do. So in general, I'm really pleased, I'm relieved, and all I've got to do now are those electronics. So I think I ought to crack on with those, but for now, oh, glad it's over. Nearly done, nearly complete, just need those graphics. Wonder where I am today. Exterminate, exterminate, you are the Doctor. I'm a Dalek, I will exterminate you! Not today, thank you! Back to the TARDIS! Doopy-doopy-doopy-doopy-doop. Oh, my door's fallen off. Never mind. Oh, post! Knife. Ah, perfect. That's just what I need. Yeah. Oh, there's a lot better work. Right. I talk. Right, non-replaceable batteries. Well, we'll soon see about that. So what's inside this? Okay, so that's the button then. That's a momentary action switch. Ah. Okay. Well, that's obviously the power switch, lights, sound. So this is our main board here. I think I might be able to do some surgery on this. On to the electronics. This is the bit I've been, I don't want to say dreading, it's just I haven't soldered or done anything like this for a long time. And they say it's a bit like learning to ride a bike. Well, I never really learned to ride the bike, so I sort of, I know what I'm doing. It's just, it's getting hot pokey bits and then sticking
low melty bits into that and then bring them all together, and you know, it's all fine and dandy. So already I've had to solder this speaker back onto the board because I knew it would happen eventually. I picked it up and it just went boink and it fell off, so it does work. So we know my solder's good because we can hear it. Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Anyway, so the next thing I want to do is I want to snip this off, this switch, and replace it with that. It'll become obvious why. You know, those of you who know electronics will know what I'm doing, but that's what I'm going to do next. So, yeah, I suppose I better get on with it. Snippy snippy. Wobble wobble. Oh, that was interesting. Ha! That was interesting. That made the connection when I snipped it off, so... Actually, let's just do that again. Nope, too wobbly. Right, soldering. Well, I say soldering. Got to strip these first, then it's soldering. Okay, what I'm doing here, as you can see, I've got my hot glue. I don't have it too runny yet, so it's not too hot. But I just want to add a little bit of hot glue in here just to stabilise those puny little wires. So hopefully this will work. Should do. It works in my head, so it should work in real life. I don't have to be too neat about it. Just a little dab without cooking the damn thing. Come on, get on that. There we go. Let's take that stringy bit off because that will irritate me. There we are. So, does it still work? Let's have a quick test. I haven't cooked anything. Right, come on. Yep, still works. Perfect. Oh, you can't see. Perfect. And here's where I cock up. Right. How can I get this into there? Have my high quality thing. Actually, if I put, oops, if I put this over here, I can lean on it. Just want to. Come on. Tin the end here, please. Tin. Tin. Yeah, look at that. I look like I know what I'm doing. Oh, God, I wish I wasn't shaking so much, that's for sure. Just want to smooth that out a bit. There we go. I suppose I ought to do a bit on the other side. Come on. The heat draws it to itself. Ow! That's why I don't usually solder, because I've just put my bloody finger on it. Trying to stabilise myself. No, have I? There we go, that's what I... Whoops, didn't want to do that. Not to that, not there. Okay, there we go. That's... Oops, no, that's... not what I was asking for. There we are, that's better. Now, unfortunately, I threw the solder very far away. What did I do with it? Well, maybe this will work. Okie dokie. There we are. That's one hell of an untidy solder. And way. Try that for size. Right, just got to do that on the other side now. Ow! This is what happens when you don't concentrate and you try to stabilise your soldering iron with your finger. Big blister happens. Yummy! Right, so it's done, and despite having not soldered anything for coming on for 17 years, I know I should have done loads since then, but just never needed to. But anyway, it's looking alright, it works, and all I need to do now is put this in the roof. And then complain to my wife about that. Right, let's put this in place. Now my wife has already moaned at me about burning my finger, so the next thing I can do is burn my finger again with hot glue. So what could possibly go wrong? Everything. So I just want to dollop this around at first, try not to melt everything, try to keep it relatively, there we go, nearly burnt myself. I'm not shaking too badly at the minute, but bloody hell, get in there! At least be a little bit neater than that. How's that positioned? Let's just have a look. Okay, move that up into there, get that nicely positioned, put a bit of hot glue on there, and a bit of hot glue on here. Come on, don't stick to everything. Ow, ow, why have I just put my finger in it? It's hot glue. Okay, so that's not exactly the tidiest of constructions, but I will sort it out a bit later. I just need for this glue to chooch and cool down, and I'll just put the rest, and hopefully the next time we see it, it'll be ready to be installed. That's the roof that is installed onto the rest of the model.
So, with the electronics now installed into the roof and a new set of temporary sign box and pull to open panel graphics gingerly held in place by friction, I shot this little bit of footage to demonstrate how the lamp and the sound effects worked, not just for the client, but also for my dad, who maintained a keen interest in my work. I've always kept my dad updated on every project that I've ever worked on, and this was obviously no different.
One final time with the old Vorpy. You see? Contactless. With the magic wand. That's the final update.
He said that he was impressed by the build quality and that my idea of having the electronics activated without a visible switch was really very clever, and that made me feel rather proud indeed, especially as I always saw him as my mentor and chief critic. This was the last project that my dad ever saw of mine. He died just a few weeks after its completion, and I miss him terribly. The last step on this build adventure was to replace all the temporary graphics with the final versions, and to get this done I had a little bit of help from my friends. The basic templates were sent to me by an old buddy, Bill Rudloff, who I've known since my days when I ran the TARDIS Builders Forum. These were sent on to my good friend Jared Longley in Australia, and between the pair of us, the files were adjusted back and forth until I felt that the sizing was correct and that the colour was a perfect tonal match to the painted colour of the model. Once this was locked down and signed off, the graphics were yet again printed up, carefully cut along the registration marks with a brand new blade in my knife to ensure a perfectly clean cut, and then finally set into place. With that, I could call the commission completed. And now for an overly dramatic reveal, even though you've pretty much already seen it. Yeah, enough of that now, I'm already bored. Whoever's editing this better stop messing about. Oh yeah, it's me. Yeah, sorry about that. Carry on. And so here is the conclusion of 6 weeks worth of work, and I'm pretty happy actually. It's one of those projects where I'm actually really sorry to see it go, so that means I must like it. If I look at a project that I'm doing for a client and I don't want to see it go, then I know I've done well because it means I want to keep it. It's been a challenge, but it's been fun. So all we have to do now is send it on its merry way to its new owner. And to do that, use the TARDIS key. Unfortunately, I've been doing very thorough quality assurance tests on the electronics and I've kind of worn the batteries down, but you're going to get the general idea. So bon voyage TARDIS, and hope your new owner likes you as much as I do. Right, I'm not entirely sure where that went, possibly went to its new owner. If not, hopefully it will turn up here and I get to keep it, but who knows. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. Right. Ready? Easy. 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 Yeah, too much! Ah.
Dat is een beetje liep een halsband.